If you know that you've got a book in you but feel stuck writing it, you don't need a ghostwriter. What you need is a model. Because the best way to set up your book for success is to look at what's worked for others in your situation. After a decade of coaching busy experts to get their work published, I've narrowed it down to 6 specific book types that boost authority, build brands, and catalyze businesses. And today, you'll learn exactly which one fits your goals. Starting with the first book, if you feel burned out from work and you want to pivot into a more rewarding career, this is the type of book for you. Many people feel stuck in unfulfilling jobs, and as a professor, I could relate, but tell me if this sounds like you. You're about 10 years into your career, you've racked up a ton of valuable experience, and the job is still tied to your identity. You're still a teacher, a lawyer, or a healthcare provider, but the problem is you don't have any agency, and you don't like the direction that things are going in. So what do? Well, you don't want to go back to school and learn a completely new trade. This job is you. You want to keep doing the job that you were born to do, but on your own terms. Well, what if I told you that there's a type of book that'll help you do just that, and writing it can be the first step to launching your personal brand? Here's the story of how a single book turned a burned-out teacher into a thought leader. Ana Lorena Fabreja, excuse my Spanish here, her students call her Miss Fab, used her book to reinvent her career, raising her visibility beyond the classroom and building authority in the new space of ed tech. After writing her book, The Learning Game, she became the ambassador for Synthesis, an AI math tutor that spun out of the micro school set up by Elon Musk for SpaceX employees. But her life wasn't always this exciting. Miss Fab spent years teaching in the traditional school system. Like many teachers, she got into education for all the right reasons, but she grew disheartened when she saw the realities of the conventional classroom. The things that the school was making her teach, students didn't need, and Miss Fab knew what students really needed to thrive in the new economy, but she had no power to shape the curriculum. So she made the hard decision to leave, not to start a new career, but to carve out a space in which she can better prepare the students of today for the economy of tomorrow. Writing a book was her way of making that change. But the great thing about this kind of book is that when Miss Fab started writing it, she didn't have all the answers. She started with questions. Questions like, what if we could turn the game of school into the game of learning? How can we sustain a love of learning through all stages of life? And what truly excites kids to learn? And how can we preserve that? This started off as a list of questions, and it ended as her message and the platform on which she built her new career as a thought leader. The great thing about this type of book is that you don't need to be an expert to write one. Writing is the process through which you become an expert. I mean, think about it this way. How do you become a teacher? You become a teacher by teaching. How do you become a writer? You become a writer by writing. And if you want to become an authority in your space, well, the way to become an authority is by being an author. Miss Fab didn't write this book because she was an authority. Before writing the book, she was an everyday school teacher. But her career brought her into contact with some pressing questions that are on the tip of everyone's tongue, but haven't yet been addressed. And this is exactly how you know that you're writing something valuable. Many people have this mistaken notion of writing, that when you're writing, what you're doing is taking these fully formed ideas in your head and transcribing them into words. And sure, that does kind of happen, but that's usually the kind of writing that we would describe as boring. Think memos, emails, and the worst kinds of nonfiction. But expert writing starts off as an extension of thinking. Experts like Miss Fab use writing to clarify their own thoughts and to generate new ones. This kind of writing is problem solving. It's like thinking aloud. And after some time, the writing process actually generates new knowledge. Because writing, it really requires you to lay out your ideas in all their messiness. And then you start to fill in the missing gaps and cut out and refine until you've distilled your message into its clearest form. And by generating this new knowledge, that is what makes you an expert. So if you're building a personal brand, few things are more powerful than saying, I wrote the book on that. That's why I call this type of book the personal brand builder. If you're sitting there thinking, well, that sounds great, but I don't know where to start. Well, the important thing to understand is that you don't need permission to start with this kind of book. You can just write things. You don't write a book because you've arrived. You write a book because you have questions that need answers. And if you've already started asking these kinds of questions and reflecting on your own work or wanting more from your career, then you're already on the path. Here's how you can take the problems you see in your job and turn them into a book that launches a personal brand. A great place to begin is with the 5 whys. So the next time you have a bad day at work, ask yourself the question why 5 times. So why did I have a bad day at work? Well, I wasn't prepared for class. The lesson didn't go very well. Well, why wasn't I prepared? I wasn't familiar with the new curriculum. Okay, why wasn't I familiar with the new curriculum? Well, it's new and I just didn't want to learn it. Why didn't I want to learn it? Well, it's pointless. It's all focused on this test and standard achievement scores. Well, why are we teaching this? Bingo. If you can answer that question, you might be on to a good book. Second, start capturing stories on a weekly or even daily basis. Taking myself as an example, as an English professor, I have a new teaching or insight that pops up in class every week. If you're really teaching, then you're responding in real time to the class, and you can see what's working and when the lights are on in the students. So although we return to a lot of the core curriculum each week, which we've kind of run through a dozen times before, we're always developing new ways to teach it. There's always some new example or metaphor that pops up in the midst of conversation. So each week, I make it a habit to reflect on the week that just passed and write about a teachable moment. These stories, having a database of these stories, can become the basis of your teaching. And here's why it's important to write about the stories first and then extract the lessons. So in my nonfiction writing class, I teach that an idea has 3 parts. A claim, which is like a truth claim or an assertion about the way that things are or the way that things should be. Second, there's evidence, and then there's an explanation that links the evidence to the claim. But the problem with so many nonfiction writers is that they start with the claim and then they go looking for evidence to support it, which often results in a mismatch. They use a quote or a data point that seems plausibly connected to the idea, but when you really look at it, it's like they're taking a square peg and putting it into a round hole. It doesn't match. So I'm always stressing to these writers, start with the evidence, analyze it, and allow your claim to emerge from that evidence. So similarly here, you don't want to write a book with these unsupported assertions, because then you'll be racking your brain looking for anecdotes that don't really relate to the point that you're trying to make. Or even worse, you wind up just making up flimsy stories to prove your point. So instead, keep a log of your experiences at work and allow your message to emerge organically out of those stories. Third, define your audience. Now, this is a pretty basic point for writing, but it's really important for this type of book. So take a look at Miss Fab's book. You can really tell that she nailed her audience. Her book is full of references that'll be really familiar to CEOs, tech entrepreneurs, and the kind of person who I would generally define as living in a ranch out near Austin. There are references to Lindy ideas, skin in the game, anti-fragility, which are all from Nassim Taleb, mental models, that's Charlie Munger, stoicism from Ryan Holiday, and anti-goals from Tim Ferriss, and a whole post about Naval Ravikant. This is a really good move. It's not enough to just pick an ideal reader and then go on writing the book that you want. You want to bend your language around that reader so they feel like you're talking directly to them. Fourth, do not wait until you're ready. Miss Fab shows us that anyone can write a book. She decided that she wanted to write a book before she knew how to write. She knew that writing is a skill just like any other, and to learn that skill, she started working with a writing coach, which you can do too, just click the link down below the like button. And while Miss Fab's type of book is great for pivoting in your career and launching a personal brand, there's another type of book that might rustle some feathers. But honestly, if your book doesn't make someone mad, it's probably not worth writing. Most nonfiction books are, frankly, forgettable. They might be useful, but they're not exactly memorable. This is the kind of book where you might say, oh yeah, I think I read that one years ago, after I jog your memory. But if you want to write a book that establishes authority, your book needs to give more than advice. It needs an argument. That's because books that flip the status quo are the ones that get talked about. But this kind of book isn't just about being edgy or provocative. It's the kind of book that establishes you as someone people turn to for insight and commentary, which opens doors and attracts new opportunities. This is an ideas book, but it's not so much about sharing a useful idea as much as challenging the way that people think. So my favorite recent example of this type of authority-building book is right here, The Sovereign Child by Aaron Stupel. It's a parenting book, but not really the normal kind. Instead of offering practical advice about how to deal with common issues like bedtimes and sleep schedules, diet, and monitoring screen time, it flips the niche on its head. It gives parents a strong argument that children deserve full, unconditional freedom, the same freedom enjoyed by everyone else. And the moment you hear this argument, well, there are all kinds of responses and qualifications that come to mind. Well, not full freedom, right? Children don't have fully formed brains. Well, this book addresses all of them. And the reason this book is so valuable, the reason it's spread so quickly by word of mouth and landed the author on the Tim Ferriss podcast, is that it offers a real alternative to the dominant view, and it invites readers to join into that larger conversation that the author is having. This is the kind of book that readers buy multiple copies of, not because they agree with every word, but because they want to put it in the hands of their friends so that they can talk about the issues that it raises. That's why I called this type of book the new authority. So if you want to write this type of book that creates buzz, builds trust, and establishes thought leadership, here's how you can flip the status quo with your writing. To write this kind of book, you want to start with the idea that bothers you. You might already have one on the tip of your tongue, and a contrarian take that just seems to fall out of your mouth. Even the more agreeable and polite people among us probably have some viewpoint like this, even if they haven't been bold enough to share it socially. So just ask yourself the Peter Thiel job interview question. What important truth do few people agree with you on? Don't hold back. In formal academic writing, nuance and restraint are essential, but if you want your book to spark conversation, avoid hedging. Make your boldest case and let your readers supply their own qualifications. So for example, with The Sovereign Child, it argues against coercing children altogether, even when it comes to school. And Naval Ravikant embraced about 90% of this message, but declared that he would be a tyrant when it comes to math and reading, giving his kids freedom only after mastering those basics. Third, build your argument in layers. The core skill for this type of book is persuasion. So to move readers towards your view, you need to build a bridge from where they are to where you want them to be. So stories, examples, analogies, and thoughtful responses to their objections. Each one of these is a stone in that bridge. Of course, you want to expect and welcome disagreement. If no one could possibly disagree with your idea, it's probably not worth sharing. I constantly remind my students about this. An idea is only an idea if someone else could argue against it. The world doesn't need a book that proves that water is wet. It's just true. Real ideas make truth claims, and truth claims demand evidence and reasoning in order to be considered valid. So if you're wondering whether your book is worth writing, ask yourself, what's the core idea and who might disagree with it? It's funny to follow the author, Aaron Stupel, on X because he's constantly sharing the negative reviews that this book receives. But he's quite insightful about this. Disagreement is a strong signal that readers are engaging with the ideas in your book. Finally, make it a conversation starter. Your best ideas should be bangers, the kind of lines that get highlighted on Kindle and shared as memes. There are plenty of rhetorical techniques to help you with this, and I've created a video covering 31 of the most effective ones of turning your ideas into shareable insights. You'll find the link to that video down below the like button. But the best books aren't always conversation starters. Sometimes they're the quiet ones that solve problems and drive sales. Guess what happened when this marketing consultant skipped the publisher and wrote half a book? She doubled her rates and filled her calendar. If you're a consultant or a coach, then you probably know the pain of re-explaining yourself to new clients. As a teacher, I can totally relate. We have these canned lessons that we return to again and again. You know exactly where to begin, when you'll insert a joke, and what the next question will be before the student even asks. It's all quite tedious, and it doesn't feel like the best use of your time. How much better would it be if you could just package that expertise into a book that solves those early problems and brings qualified leads into your consultancy? Well, that's exactly what April Dunford did with her book, Obviously Awesome. April left her career in corporate marketing to consult with businesses on product positioning, which is a niche topic in the world of business that was her zone of genius. The problem is that not many people know what positioning is or why they need it. And even those that remember hearing something about product positioning during their MBA, they have an outdated and unworkable idea about how to do it. So there's this knowledge gap standing between April's ideal clients and her consultancy practice. Many consultants will try to close that gap by writing a few blog posts on their website, but that's too shallow. I mean, do you ever actually read those? And if you do, how many do you read before you click off to something else? Others will host workshops or webinars, but those are too intensive. They require promotion, registration, in-person meetings, and they're not scalable. All that just to let clients know about your service. That's why April wrote her book, Obviously Awesome, with the goal of teaching her method for product positioning once and for all. The book also serves to filter leads. If you like the book, then you're going to love working with her. So she built the book like a product. It's short, under 30,000 words, skimmable, and it has this unique formatting that color codes the case studies so that you can dive into the parts that need elaboration and breeze through the rest. With her background in the corporate world, April initially brought her book to publishers, but their feedback was all about mass market appeal. They wanted her to write a self-help book, something like How to Position Your Life, using product positioning as a metaphor for personal growth. And that might make sense if your goal is a bestseller, but April had a different goal. She wanted to write a useful book that would serve as an asset for her new consulting practice. So she ignored their advice, and the result was she became so oversubscribed with leads that she doubled her rates and still found her calendar booked out months in advance. Every new client had already read the book. Think of this type of book as part lead magnet, part sales rep. It addresses a specific urgent problem your prospect is facing, ideally the problem that comes just before the one that your consultancy solves. This is not an idea book, it's a practical and targeted book. The solution it offers is your method, which readers get a taste of through the book, and if it resonates, they'll know exactly how to find you. As they move through a book that is laser focused on their pain point, they're being immersed in your world and approach, and indoctrinated into your language and perspective. By the end, some will reach out already halfway sold. This is like a great sales rep. Your book works for you while you sleep, showcasing your expertise, building trust, and bringing in leads who already know what you offer and who are ready to buy. That's why I call it a lead getter. It's a short, actionable guide that solves a specific problem and positions you as the expert. So if you want to write this type of book, the first thing to do is to choose a specific urgent problem. Don't throw in the kitchen sink. You just need to focus on one painful, high-stakes issue that your reader is eager to solve. A lot of books will try to impress their prospects with the sheer volume of information that they know, but your goal with this book is usefulness. You're writing a problem solver, not an encyclopedia. Ideally, the problem that your book tackles should come just before the one that your consultancy solves. So for example, if you help startups scale their operations, then your book might focus on how to find product market fit. Once they've got that nailed down, they're going to need your help with scaling. Or if you consult on leadership development, then you might want to write a book that could help new managers transition from individual contributors to team leaders. Alternatively, your book can present your full method in a step-by-step DIY format. That approach delivers value to low-ticket readers while simultaneously priming high-ticket prospects for your done-for-you or done-with-you service. Either way, the book builds trust and positions you as the guide. Next, you want to test your method in the real world. So if you're using your book to launch a consultancy offer, then you need to be sure that your method actually works. Because with a book, you won't be there standing over their shoulder to correct any misunderstandings or special applications. So, for example, my consultancy helps nonfiction authors write and publish their books. And while I have over a decade of experience helping academics and scientists get published, that method doesn't apply to every author. So I'm still refining it, and I'm not yet ready to write a book about it. The same goes for you. Until your method is proven and repeatable, focus on testing it. Teach it in one-on-one sessions, deliver workshops, and share it through content. Put your frameworks into the wild and keep refining it until they're clear, effective, and irrefutable. Next, like April, you want to build your book like a product. Keep it short, skimmable, and focus on delivering a quick win. You're not assigning homework here. You're solving a problem. So the goal is not to showcase everything that you know, it's to give readers a streamlined, actionable path based on your expertise. Think about how good it feels to finish a book these days. That's the kind of book that people recommend. So a helpful rule of thumb here is to ask yourself whether your client could finish reading it on a short flight between takeoff and landing. But if high quality leads is what you want, then there's another kind of book that could have them flooding in to your business. Because writing a book is a great way to build your audience, but an even better way is to borrow the audience of someone else. Take Chris Voss, for example. Now, when he left the FBI, he knew how to negotiate with terrorists, but not with podcast producers. But when he wrote this next type of book, it got him invited onto all the major podcasts, TED Talks, and high-ticket speaking engagements. Even world-class experts like Chris Voss need visibility. You can have a transformative offer and a thriving business, but if people don't know about you, it doesn't matter. Most consultancy businesses rely on reputation and referrals to find new clients, methods that don't scale. But if you want to grow, then you need to get yourself on podcasts, conference stages, and other media platforms. But here's the catch. Podcasts don't invite businesses. They invite authors. Before writing the mega bestseller, Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss ran Black Swan Group, a consultancy based on business negotiation. As a former FBI negotiator, Voss had a killer background, but when he transitioned into the world of business, he struggled to gain visibility. So when he asked around for ways to raise his profile, the advice was consistent. You need to write a book. It's your business card. But with so much to learn about business and marketing, Voss didn't have any interest in also becoming a full-time writer. So he partnered with the ghostwriter Tal Raz. Voss brought the vision and structure for the book, and together they created something that was really readable, tactical, and story-driven. But the great thing about this book is that although its purpose was to attract clients to his high-ticket consultancy, nothing in the book is a sales pitch. It's packed with practical insights and memorable stories, and it barely mentions his consultancy firm until the final third or so of the book. And the result was a global bestseller that solves a mass market problem. And while the royalties from the book sales were a nice bonus, the real value of this book was the visibility it gave to Voss and his consultancy. The book catapulted Voss into the spotlight. He spoke at TEDx, delivered corporate keynotes, and made rounds on nearly every major podcast. I still remember the year he was everywhere. His podcast circuit felt inescapable. Yet, through all of it, he never promoted his firm directly. He wasn't introduced as Chris Voss, founder of Black Swan Group. He was introduced as Chris Voss, author of Never Split the Difference. All the media attention pointed to the book, and the book quietly pointed to his consultancy. By the time readers reached the final chapters of the book, they knew what kind of training he offered and how to find him. Writing this kind of book is a powerful way to raise your visibility, especially if your goal is to get invited onto podcasts. But the thing is, podcast hosts are choosy about who they share their audience with. They won't share a message that feels like a sales pitch because that'll cheapen their own brand. That's why a value-packed, story-driven book like Never Split the Difference works so well. It delivers real insights, so inviting you onto their podcast will add value to their audience. The book is built around a clear, compelling idea. In Voss's case, negotiation is about psychology, not logic. And while that message has broad mass market appeal, it also reaches Voss's ideal clients, business negotiators and sales teams. By leading with a bold, memorable message, Voss earned the media attention that he garnered. From there, he was able to skim off the top tier of readers, those ready to invest in his high-ticket consultancy, but everybody else still got a practical, engaging book. This book is what I call the booking agent. It's designed not just to teach, but for reach. It's built around the kind of message that's worth spreading, and it'll have podcast hosts and conference organizers begging you to come advertise your services. So if you want to raise the visibility of your offer and think podcasts and conference invitations are the best way to reach that audience, then here's the book for you. Position your book for mass market usefulness. Chris Voss's offer is hyper niche, a high-ticket consultancy for business professionals. But his book wasn't written just for them. It was written for everyone. The core message stays the same. Negotiations are about psychology, but the stories, tactics, and applications were tailored for broad market appeal. That's the move. If your goal is to be invited onto podcasts and conference stages where you can spread your message far and wide, then write a book that stands on its own. Make it genuinely useful to anyone who picks it up, whether or not they'll ever hire you. The wider the value, the further it spreads, and the more qualified prospects it quietly attracts. Second, distill your message into one powerful idea. If you want your message to spread, it needs to be designed for transmissibility. Like a virus, it should be sleek, efficient, and easy to catch at first exposure. Then, easy for others to share. The title of the book, Never Split the Difference, does exactly that. It captures the book's core insight, which is, in hostage negotiations, you can't compromise. You don't settle for half. You negotiate for everything. When readers get that meme, it's hard to believe. It's like, what do you mean I don't have to compromise in business negotiations? I can just get all of what I want and leave nothing on the table. It's the kind of book you have to pick up and read. And when your book revolves around this kind of a bold, memorable idea, it becomes a lot easier for others to quote and share. A clear concept makes your message stick, and when your message travels well, then so do you. Next, lead with the book and the business will follow. Do not turn this book into a brochure. In fact, at least for now, you want to forget that you even have an offer to sell. The moment your writing feels salesy, trust erodes and your credibility drops. The reason I love this book is because I've read it 2 or 3 times before I ever realized that Voss was running this consultancy in the background. I didn't realize what the book was doing. I just appreciated its value. So if you're going to write this kind of book, then keep your goal in mind. You want to create a shareable idea that's packed with practical insights and designed to earn podcast invites and conference stages. Through each chapter, you can subtly weave in your philosophy and method, but never pitch. Let the most motivated readers connect the dots and seek you out. Your consultancy can live quietly on your website and social media, but the book should stand on its own. All right, so these past few books have been focused on business, but what if you just want to write a book for the pleasure of your friends and family, and maybe have a positive second-order effect on others who read it? Well, let me ask you this. If you could hand your child one book when you're gone, what would it be? Because of course, not every book is written to build a brand or drive business. Some are written to just capture experience and wisdom. These books are not driven by market demand, so writers are a lot more free to craft a book that reflects themselves. And for that reason, these books can often be quite quirky or surprising. At the end of the day, everyone has a story. We've all walked our own path and come against our own obstacles and found our way through them. And these experiences are wisdom worth sharing. These are the stories that used to be passed around campfires at night, but a book is something that will outlast the oral tradition. This book is all about legacy. capturing what you've learned so that others can benefit from your hard-earned experience long after you've gone. Anthony Pompliano is an American entrepreneur, investor, Bitcoin advocate, and US Army veteran who also hosts a podcast. And as though he wasn't busy enough, he also wrote a book called How to Live an Extraordinary Life. But the interesting thing about this book is that he didn't set out to write one. It's just something that emerged after he began writing private letters to his children. Each letter captures a life lesson, something Pompliano had learned through experience in his rich and varied life, or it could even be advice that he received from somebody else. As a repository for all the wisdom that he'd garnered through his life, he eventually realized that these letters might be useful to others, not just his kids, so he compiled them into a book. The book is structured as 65 short letters, each one built around a single idea. A common chapter features a lesson, the story, and the mistake that brought it about, and actionable advice for how to apply it in your own everyday life. The reason this type of book is important is that experience is not heritable. You can't put it in your will. Everyone has a story to tell and wisdom that they earned, and there's no better way to leave a legacy than to capture these stories in a book. So when people think of legacy, they usually think of wealth, but you don't want to just leave a material legacy. You can leave an intellectual one as well by writing a book like Pompliano's. And the great thing about this type of book is that there's really no prototype, no template that you can follow. The content is shaped by your own lived experience. And whenever I work with writers on this type of book, I really try to get them to tap into that spirit, for lack of a better word, the singularity, the thing that makes them weird and unique. When we find it, we can really channel a book unlike any other. So yes, the content is there to preserve memory, a record of your values and your contribution to the world. But the form in which that content is carried, the voice, the stories, the format, the organization, all of it works together to form a character that, if done well, is as strange and singular as its author. And as a gift to your children, your friends, or to your trusted readers, such a book becomes a precious gift. This is what I call the legacy book. The goal is not to go viral, not to generate leads, it's to say what needs to be said. Because you don't want to die with your best lessons in your head. Instead, capture them in a book that will outlast you. Here's how. Write for one person. So think, who can benefit from the lessons that you've garnered in life? This could be a child, a grandchild, a mentee, someone who could use your guidance. And of course, if you're writing to publish, then you know that it will be read by others. But the conceit of writing to just one person will give your message a specificity and earnestness. A great model for this is the best-selling book Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. It became the cornerstone of a whole movement in US race relations, but it was conceived as a message to his son. Second, no lesson without a story. This kind of book is not the place for grand theories and speculation. The value comes from what you've lived and experienced. So for every point you want to share, include the experience that taught it to you. Third, let go of the idea of publishing. Just treat it like a gift to one specific person, or even as notes to yourself. Think of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It was never written to be published, and it's basically just a collection of his private reflections. He might even be embarrassed by the thought that so many people have found wisdom and solace in his private journal. Now, this last type of book is more of a classic. It's not designed to blow up your business or even leave a legacy, although it could very well do that too. Imagine how you'd feel if your book not only made it into the hands of thousands of strangers around the world, but it also changed their lives for the better. Now, there are plenty of authors who write a book to build a business or launch a brand, but for many of the books that you've probably got on your bookshelf, they come from a deeper place. Authors who write this type of book have often lived through something important, something others could benefit from, but which isn't really talked about. These books don't set out to own a niche. They come in all shapes and sizes, but the thing that they all have in common is that they aspire to tell the truth. Not in a journalistic sense, but in the sense of showing the reader something true and important about the world. This type of book exists to have an impact. They open a window onto the world and show the reader something valuable, So if you've seen something that others don't yet recognize, you need to write this book. That's what Paul Miller did. When he left his job, which is the dream of many of us, he didn't feel the freedom that we imagine to be on the other side of that decision. Instead, he was dealing with a sense of disorientation. Call it the unbearable lightness of being unemployed. So he started writing to process the complex feelings he was having about work, identity, and meaning. Feelings that not only Paul, but more or less everyone was dealing with at the time of the COVID pandemic. So he moved to Asia and continued writing as a way of processing these ideas that were on the tip of everyone's tongue. One great thing about Paul's writing journey is that he initiated what he called curiosity conversations, which are free one-on-one calls with readers. So over 5 years, he had nearly 400 of these conversations, and he kept hearing the same recurring themes of hidden dissatisfaction, fear, and unspoken dreams. And the great thing about this two-way exchange is that it made him realize that readers were experiencing what he was going through, and that his writing could give others language to express what they all knew but hadn't yet articulated. Ultimately, by writing online and really engaging with his readers, Paul became a spokesperson for a distinct cultural moment in our evolving relationship with work and meaning, and these reflections and exchanges became crystallized in his book, The Pathless Path. Pathless Path held up a mirror to the world. For the author, writing it was a deeply personal exercise, but by sharing it and entering into conversation with so many of his readers, Millard was able to reflect something true that was emerging for many around the world. Everyone was experiencing it, but Paul took the time to put it into language. This is what the best writing does. It opens a window onto the world, showing the reader something beautiful and true. These books succeed because they're grounded in truth, and that truth is presented with clarity and confidence. It presents ideas as if they're obvious, undeniable truths. No hemming and hawing, no maybe or it depends. It's just straight talk, as if the writer is simply seeing things clearly and is helping you to see them too. But to say that books like Paul's come across as straight talk is not to say that the writing is uninspired. These writers still need to make tough choices about what to say and how to say it, but on the page it seems effortless because the subject matter that they're explaining is plain as day. They speak with cool authority, never pausing to doubt or explain the mechanics of what's going on. That's the part that makes it so powerful. It feels clean, easy to follow, and persuasive, like the truth just sitting there in plain sight. These types of books are what I call a gift. They're written because you've seen something, and they come to the reader as a window onto the world, showing them a truth that they could see too if they just looked at the world through the lens of your book. So if that's the kind of book that sounds right for you, then here's a good place to start. First, write the book that only you can write. The observations in Paul's book about the changing landscape of work and meaning could have been taken on by so many. You can imagine a similar book being written by an economist or a philosopher. And while the ideas could have come from more or less anyone, nobody but Paul Millard could have written The Pathless Path. It was his personal journey through work and life that made the ideas irrefutable. They're not just theories or projections in his book. They're presented with the simplicity and clarity of the truth. Second, focus on the reader's transformation. While of course these kinds of books tend to be narrative-driven, we must always keep in mind that a book written without consideration for the reader is not actually a book, it's a diary. Even if the story that you tell is about you, it's not really about you, it's about the reader. Another way of putting it is to say that if the story works, then the reader is imagining themselves in your footsteps. So a useful razor when making these kinds of narrative decisions is to consider what you want the reader to understand, feel, or do differently after reading this section. If you can't answer that question, then cut it. Now, surprisingly, if you want to write a book, then you should hold off from writing. Because if you're going to chop down a tree, you first need to sharpen your axe. Similarly, if you don't have a blueprint for success, then nobody's going to read it. So watch this video next because it's going to break down the same step-by-step method that I walk all my clients through whenever we're getting started on a book writing project. So be sure to go check it out.